a little introduction. I'm a senior software engineer here at Nationale-Nederlanden, but I'm also a freelance web developer with my own company since 2004. As already mentioned, I'm the curator of NativeScript.nl, which features tips, tricks, and also reviews of online trainings. And I'm a Telerik developer expert for NativeScript since the beginning of this year. I want to take you on a little memory lane, my memory lane, and to get the perspective on how we get here, today actually, why you're all here. It started in 1972. I also had a picture of me in my birthday suit, but I didn't think that would be what you wanted to see. I live in the city of Gouda, the city of cheese, candles, and of course stroopwafels. Stroopwafels, or in Dutch, stroopwafels. And in my childhood, I didn't have a computer. In that time, we played outside. I played soccer. I was a goalkeeper there. I thought I could rock a black suit with a white t-shirt and Burgundy All-Stars. I don't know if that was a good choice. And I also was a DJ in a local club for a few years. Yeah, I was before DJ Chesto, but in 1991, things got real. The army called. I was drafted. I am there, but you had recognized me, right? So I had to do that for a year, and after that, I thought I need to have a proper job. Well, I got it here. It's the old logo from 1992. I joined them, and for the first 6 years, I was supporting pension insurance agents in the back office. And actually, 2 weeks ago, it was exactly 25 years ago, I was hired here. I always thought I would only be here for a few years and then move on to another job. And I always made fun of my father, who worked for 40 years for the same company. I'm not doing that anymore, sorry. Then, on a personal note, in 1994, this guy relighted my fire for Formula 1 again. Pun intended, relight my fire, yes. This is Jos de Bos, now better known as the father of Max Verstappen. And it gave me bi-weekly entertainment again. And it made more sense when we got to 1996, when we got internet via dial-up. Who remembers that? That was a great time. Because my girlfriend always complained, I want to call somebody. Sorry, I'm on the internet now. For me, that was the time to combine my love for Formula 1 and also to start building websites with HTML, JavaScript, some Perl, some PHP, not CSS, it wasn't there yet. And at that time, I got more interested in IT. I did some testing work here at Nationale-Nederlanden, but wanted to move on to the IT department and become a developer. So at the end of 1998, I moved on to the IT department, got working with Turbo Pascal, Borland Delphi, and also an in-house Java-based framework called IBIS. There are some people who know that. I did that until the end of 2013, because then we had our team was split up to different parts of the company, and I joined the pension portals team. This is showing a little video about what it is, but in basically it's that team maintains portals for employees and employees who have the pensions insured at Nationale-Nederlanden, so they can look at their pensions, do some predictions for the future and stuff like that. But the most important thing for me was that at that time they were thinking about launching an app. And they asked me to participate, And yeah, of course, I would like that. I had did some stuff with PhoneGap, Cordova, so I was very interested to be there. And in the end, that app became the Mijn Pensioencoach, or My Pension Coach in English. At that time, we were in the process of selecting vendors and choosing and seeing what kind of functionality we would like to have, what platform we were going to do that. In that time, my participation in that was mainly testing, thinking about the interface, and building actual calculation objects, so JavaScript files, to do all kinds of calculations in the app. And show you a little video and tell what you see about it. Yeah, this is the My Pensioencoach app. It's a marketing instrument with all Dutch people as a target. The reason we do it is to make them more aware of pensions and the impact of financial decisions. Here you see some parts of it, but basically you can enter a desired income for when you want to retire. And when you enter your current gross annual income, we can give you a suggestion on how much money you probably want to have when you retire. You also enter details about your pension schemes that you already have. And you can enter savings or investments that you have for your retirement. And at that time, we can calculate everything to the moment of your retirement, which you can play around with. You can say, I want to go 2 years later or 2 years earlier, and we recalculate everything that way. You see it on the top there. You can play around with it. So my main thing was building these calculation objects. We were very creative with names. We had PACE, called the Pension App Calculation Engine. That was the main engine to calculate everything to that certain point of retirement. We had PEACE, the Pension Advisory Calculation Engine.
Sorry.
He likes it. And that basically gives you suggestions on how you can solve possible deficits or see whether you can work less or more to reach your target. We also had FPP, the Family Pension Plan, that's is used to combine you and your partner to see what's the total picture for the future. And I don't know why we chose a Dutch name, Doel Inkomen Advisor. So that's pretty much saying, well, this is what I earn in a year now. And based on that, with some scientific methods, we can say, okay, you probably need that amount in net income per month. All right, we had an external party build that in 2014. We like the idea of having one code base for both our apps in iOS and Android. At that time, we chose Accelerated Titanium. Seemed a good choice at the time. Because it's cross-platform, it's JavaScript. Performance wasn't that great. And the animations we wanted weren't possible at all. So we weren't that happy about it. And we found out within a year that Titanium was changing the whole platform. So basically, the whole app would have to be done again. We weren't happy with that. So we went to 2015 and we went full native because we wanted that performance and animations. But it means you have to develop it twice. And at the bottom it says we were unhappy with progress because we launched it in 2015 just before the Pensioendriedaagse, but we didn't mind a few bugs in there, so we just wanted to have it shipped, and we're still fixing bugs from that day. So at the end of 2016, about a year ago, I think, I was looking around for some other solutions, because we thought, well, why don't we do it ourselves? We have the knowledge, so let's have the power also. I was looking around and look at stuff like Ionic and Cordova, but the main thing for us was we wanted to have that native performance and native look and feel, but with the with use of the skill set that we have in-house. And in-house at that time was me looking at what could I do. So, well, I have a history with web development, so JavaScript would be a nice thing. So actually there was only one choice to make, and that was NativeScript. So I got permission then to build a proof of concept. The code was really ugly, but it didn't show on the outside, and eventually we could convince management to step up and move on from a really nasty proof of concept with just plain JavaScript to a more advanced one with Angular 2. We decided to use Angular 2 because it's an opinionated framework, so it forces us to use the same coding conventions, project structure, and library dependencies. We can use classes, TypeScript. We don't have to think about routing. You already saw something about that. Data binding is there. There's good documentation, and there's great community. There are a lot of meetups and conferences about Angular, so you can get your knowledge there. But we already had those calculation objects in JavaScript. So my first thing was to convert them all to TypeScript. It took some time, but it was nice to do. And what we also did is that we had the first 4 already, but there was a lot of logic in there that was being reused by other components. So we split them out into separate components. They have Dutch names, but I will explain a little bit. Belastingdienst means that it has anything to do with taxes. The calculator does simple calculations like, if I save X amount of money per month, how will my balance be at a particular date in the future? We have a database object that does database queries on a JSON object, the JSON database. We have some helper functions to round numbers, for instance. And well, logger is obviously for logging stuff, because we test all those components in the Google Chrome browser and can use the developer tools to see what's going on. We have the NN Verzekeraar, that's insurance calculations like converting a temporary pension into a lifelong pension. And lastly, the Sociale Verzekeringsbank, which we can do calculations like the government determined pension, which is called AOW in the Netherlands. I've put the number of lines of code under there. I checked it last night. This is including white space and comments, and I wish I was paid per line of code, because believe me or not, it's exactly 70 to 100 lines. It's not rigged, definitely not. So with that in place, we could use, we could do those calculations also in NativeScript. And what's important is that we start building services. And we started with a data service in which we could instantiate those calculation objects. And of course, we could call them. And we also put in there get and set settings for, like, say, the language. We could load the JSON database. And we encrypt and save sensitive user input. But it has grown too big. We just keep on putting stuff in there, so we have to, in the near future, have to split it up into separate parts, because you want a service to do exactly one area and not everything together. Another service we have is a validation service. It does a few things. It can deliver ranges for spinners. So in the bottom part, it says, well, you have a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 12, and you have steps of 0.05. That will return an array with all the possible numbers, so you can use it in your app. We also provide max length for input fields, and of course, if you hit the next button or the save button, we provide validation on those input fields based on, is it required, what's the minimum value, or what's the maximum value. All right. One thing we also have in the native app is multilingual. We have it's available in Dutch and English in one app, and you can switch between those two languages. But we made a little mistake there. We already had the Dutch version and then went to build in English. So we came in a situation that we had done, say, 5 of 10 pages and just forgot one word there. So what we did now from the start is we used this library, NGX Translate, and it's very easy to use, and the main thing is we started directly from scratch even before we build the pages. We put it in, and it looks a little bit like this. So it says, this is a page called Choices for Later Sparen, Keuzes voor Later Sparen, which has a page title, some button text, and some questions, and some possible answers. So in this way, we incorporate this into our app just by saying, well, on this part, I want this label from the JSON file and translate it for me. In this way, we can set a separate JSON file next to it, say in Dutch, or say we start with Dutch, we can put the next to it an English one or a German or whatever, and make it pretty easy to switch between those languages. We also can do it a little bit harder if we want to have variable text in a label. This looks a bit the same, but we just named the variable like this, so to reference which text label we want to have. But the implementation is a bit different. We go to our TypeScript file, and what we do is, in this case, we determining the current month. If it's below 10, we add a 0 before it, and then go to the translation file and first look for it here says domain. So what's the name of the month? And if we retrieve that, we inject it here in the variable, put the full year behind it, and it delivered something like this. It's the per September 2017. You see here next to each other the Dutch version and the English version. I tried it once with my coworker, and we could get German in about 5 minutes. Not complete translation, of course, but the implementation was pretty easy to do. I want to talk something about plugins. This is a plugin we love to use because we use Font Awesome as icon fonts to, for instance, have the hamburger menu up there and the chevrons here on the right. We use this plugin by some guy named Eddie, who we will see this afternoon. And this way we can use barcode scanning And we also use toast, that's at the bottom there, showing how many barcodes are scanned. And what we actually do is we have an option to upload and export from the Dutch pension registry. We convert it to multiple QR codes and then just hold the scanner for it and import them and have all the information we want. Well, another one from Eddie, just to get the app version. It's nice to have a settings page and you can see which version you have. It's getting boring, but there's Eddie again. We use NativeScript email to create draft emails. We don't have a connection yet with our back office, so with this plugin you can create a draft email that a customer can send from his own email client. And yeah, Eddie again. We also use the NativeScript plugin for Firebase. Firebase delivers a lot of stuff like a real-time database and authentication, but we only use it now for analytics. And of course we have to use something from the Telerik UI also. We use the list view. You saw that a little bit back with the pensions. You can what the main thing we choose to use the list view from Telerik UI and not the normal one is that we want to be able to swipe from the right and get an option say, well, delete this. That's a nice extra feature there. And the side drawer is a menu, and we need a menu, and this is actually the only one and the best one there is. Also a plugin from TJ Van Tol I would recommend to use, and yeah, Eddie participated in that one also, is this one is better. I got it twice. Here you see it working. The problem in iOS is if you have input fields and a button below that saying, well, send this, for instance, your keyboard will pop up and will go over the input fields and even worse, over your button, and you cannot close it. So you can never send that email. With this way you have an extra bar on top saying done, or you can move along to the next input fields, and it's a lifesaver. But it's not only NativeScript plugins you can use and that we use. We also use, for instance, Crypto.js to encrypt sensitive user input, and we save that. And as a seed for that, we use the PIN code that the user enters. So we use that to encrypt it, and if you don't use the same code, you're never gonna be able to decrypt it again. And just for easy, we also use Lodash to be able to search in JSON objects, just to make it easier. Now we're getting to a part that cost me a few weeks: joy, pain, tears, blood. And that's called Mondrian. The Dutch maybe know, maybe others also know. Piet Mondrian was a Dutch painter, was regarded one of the greatest artists in the 20th century, and was known for stuff like this. I'll get to that reference in a minute, because this is what we have in the current native app. We have a bar on a specific date or a specific age, showing what the result is of your choices, of the money you have, of the pensions you have. And right to it is we call it the rainbow page, is the details on when you click on the left one, and you get the numbers also there. But we want to do something different, and we know that was very hard. This is what we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to show everything in every age and every time period where you lived, and you can change with the chevrons. You could change your retired age, and we all just calculate it and refresh the data. And we also have, of course, we also have a rainbow page there. And it was nice. And I based it on a sample I found on drag and drop. But it also gave a few very hard problems. Because, for instance, you normally do something at the top. You catch the tap event and the pen event, and then in your JavaScript code you just do something what you want to do with it. But unfortunately, this worked on iOS. I was happy. But on Android, it doesn't know which one you want. So if you put your finger on the screen, one time it said, I think you want to tap, or the other time you want a pen, so it's totally unreliable. So we moved that from the top into our code. So basically we're listening at an event listener to the tap and the pen events, and based on what we got back, we said, oh, you wanted to tap, okay, you wanted to pen, we do this. But there are also other challenges, because if you look here, these lines are very close together. And with your fat fingers, it's very hard to tap. So that wasn't great. And also, this you see here a line, but actually it's as wide as this circle. So if you tap here, it thinks you tap on this one. So what we had to do is capture the touch event, because the very first event that is triggered is the touch event, and based on that touch event, we would be able to set the X and Y pause of where you put your finger. After that, the tap event or the pen event was fired, and then we could continue. So I was pretty happy with that. How far? It doesn't look that great yet. It was rough on the edges, and we had to optimize things. But I was happy. I went on a holiday. And on Monday, September 11, 3 days in my holiday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I received this WhatsApp message from my coworkers saying, well, here are the new graphs. Get used to it. And I'm near Hamburg and saying, what are they doing? So I won't single them out, but I'm looking at one right there, and I probably can find another one, and one is hiding. They decided, well, this is not the way to go. We should do something different because it's too complex, and it takes too much time. And in hindsight, I have to say they were right. So we took another, they took another approach when I was away. My coworker did this in a week. And this is actually, I have to be fair, it's more clear, it's much better. It gives more insight. And you don't have to do weird stuff like scrolling. You can get everything on one page. Is it ready? No. If you change your retire date, then we fill up the gaps and you get 5 tag bars. So I'm actually pretty happy that they did this, although it hurt a little bit. I want to tell something about persistent data, because we have some persistent data. We want to save user input, encrypted. We're the database of the JSON database with our calculation stuff in there. We have to save that somewhere, and also user settings like what's your preferred language. So we decided, or I take the blame, I decided to go for Couchbase Lite. It's a NoSQL database, and well, it's what it says is a replacement for common database stuff like SQLite. And it worked pretty good. Until we saw on the Android device of my coworker that after you installed the app and started it, it added about the same amount of megabytes of usage on your phone. And that felt wrong. And what are we doing actually? We're just saving some JSON files, some information, just strings. So we reverted it back to a thing called application settings, which is there already. You don't have to import any plugins or whatever. And it's very, very easy to use. It's just like key value pair. So for instance, on top it said get string settings, and just gives me a JSON file or JSON string that I can convert into a JSON object to use. If I want to remove that because maybe someone forgot his PIN code and said, well, reset everything for me, you just call remove. And at the bottom, that's, for instance, an example to save that sensitive user data. So we first stringify it, we encrypt it, and then make a string again it and put it in the application settings. It's also possible to get or set a boolean or a number and to clear everything at once. So if you want to do simple stuff, saving on the device, I would recommend to use this. I'm getting to fun stuff again for us, or for me. Webpack. Because if you use Angular, you have to use Webpack. Otherwise your app will be immense. Because there's a lot of stuff in there that you don't use. So it's pretty easy to start. You say, well, there's a package for that. You install it. You install some dependencies, and then you just run it. And if you look at it, it's all green, yay, yay. And then yes, go. And oh, sorry about that. But that was my real reaction. I'm getting all these lines. And I'm saying, where did we go wrong? It was like, well, fortunately, there were pretty clear error messages, so I could fix it. Because what we did, for instance, is we define a component with a template URL, so that reference to an HTML file that defines your page. And we used this path. If you do it like this, then you have solved a lot of problems already. You have to put in the module ID, so Webpack knows which module it's dealing with, and then you can just use a relative path to the HTML file. But we also got some errors saying, well, this variable needs to be public, not private. And we were very cautious when we started and said, well, let's make everything private. That bite us in the ass, because all I had to do is figure out which ones I had to remove to private. Fortunately, it works then, because if you're running it on a device or in the emulator, it's no problem if they're private, because they're compiled just in time and they're okay with. But with Webpack, you do ahead of time compilation, and with ahead of time compilation, you compile everything together in a bundle, including the HTML and CSS, to improve your start time and app size, but it needs public variables. You find that the hard way. And also, this is a part of the Webpack config file. This is what you get default. So get everything from the CSS directory and the fonts directory. But we also had something like an assets directory, which included our CSS files, but also images. And we had an I18N for our translation files. So we had to import these also. And it almost worked, but the styling was horrible, because I did this when it shouldn't have been this, because it could not find the CSS files. I'm over time, but we have time, I see. something about updates. And a warning, be very aware what you do updating the CLI or the core modules from NativeScript, because if you have quite a big app with various different functionality, it could break. So don't do it on a Friday afternoon and say, well, let's do this. And also Xcode. I'm looking at my coworker. He had automatic updates on his MacBook. So I thought it was Tuesday or something. He had Xcode 9. Yay. But it didn't work anymore. So he had to download 4.2 gigabytes of Xcode 8 on the company Wi-Fi. So be careful with that. And also plugins. Yeah, use the latest version, but check if they work. And it's very hard, if you use a lot of plugins, it's very hard to keep up to date when there's a new release. So I would recommend Sybil.com. You can connect your GitHub account there. I created a separate one. I didn't want to use my, say, real one. And you can subscribe to GitHub repositories that you want to follow. And if someone of those repositories makes a new release, you automatically get an email saying, well, there's a new release of this plugin or this GitHub project. And that way you can also keep an eye on Eddie if he's releasing 2 updates late in the evening. We know what you're doing there.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Sybil.com doesn't work. It's for sale.
It's for sale. Okay, I'll check what's the real URL then. I still get emails, so there must be something working. And also, if you use Angular, be aware which version you can use, because we for instance, had a problem that we updated to the latest Angular and the NativeScript Angular package, and we had quite a lot of sliders in our app, and you could use it once, and if you released it, then it was gone. You couldn't move it anymore, so we had to find out which version we still could use. I know there's a fix for that. It'll be there soon. But always be aware that you can break stuff. I'm getting there now. Almost lunchtime, I know, sorry. Just want to say something about standards of how we're working. So previously I was working on my own MacBook, and my coworker was working on a Windows laptop, and it worked fine for us until he gave his work to me and asked me, can you check it on iOS? And it didn't work. So now I can say, well, look at it yourself, because it's very easy to compare that now with emulators on your own MacBook. So we took the entry level. We installed Visual Studio Code. We said, well, let's use the same stuff. So Visual Studio Code is a very good IDE for developing NativeScript apps. We mostly use the same plugins, but most importantly, there's a plugin called Prettier that prettifies your code. We use that in the same way, because otherwise, if I change a little typo, commit it to Git, and he checks it out, he will see probably 300 changes. So be aware of that. And we also have some settings in settings.json per project with some specific look and feel. Always work with feature branches, so you can work separate from each other. I used to work alone, and I always worked on the master. That's easy, but not very good if you're working with more people. And commit often. We created build scripts, and we wrote a release procedure. And unfortunately, we still do manually testing only. So I'm very happy that Winfred is here. Let's see if we can learn something from that. So in the end, it's 2017 now. It's not released yet in the stores. We're being pushed to do it soon, but well, we're working agile, so we don't know when it's ready. We're working with NativeScript now. It's cross-platform, but we can use web technologies and have the native performance. And as I said here, we were unhappy with the progress. We are now happy with progress. Thank you.